I am definitely a professional and know what I'm doing with OBS. Welcome back to the show. I'm, as always, your host, Brody Robertson. Welcome back to Tech of a T. And today we have Gabmus on the show, who is involved, or has been involved in GTK development stuff before, GTK app development, and wanted to come onto the show to sort of, I guess maybe you should explain why you're here, and I think you could give like a better explanation for it.
All right, sure. So first of all, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So why am I here? There has been some discussion on your channel about GTK and like Libadwaita and Qt. Like as always, like we like to argue about this stuff, like religion wars. If it was another channel, we would be talking about Emacs and Vim. Anyway, so I have like am a developer, and I use GTK for the apps that I make, and I am very much like in the middle of all this discussion, and I think I have some opinions I'd like to share, and in particular, I also think that most of the discussion around this topic is a little bit strange, because many of the people that I see talk about it, I don't think that they really necessarily know what they're talking about. I'm talking about your regular Reddit posters, right? Stuff like that.
Well, yeah, they'll read like one headline about it, or they'll get like one quote from like a developer somewhere, and just that's the thing they repeat on, and maybe they expand from it there, but they don't actually look at what's really going on. They don't go into the repos. They don't read any documentation. They just sort of guess, basically.
Yeah, right. And like in general, I think that for what we're talking about here, so we're talking about open source. We're talking about free software, to be more precise. And in general, in the world of free software, there's always I always think about free software stuff with one assumption in mind. It's free, like free as in freedom, right? So you don't like it, you have your GNU given right to fork it. And so many people have forked stuff in the past. GTK2 apps with the Mate project a while ago. Still like KDE, there's a KDE3 fork somewhere, like Trinity Desktop, something like that.
Trinity, I want to say is what is Trinity Desktop?
I think it is 3.
3 sounds right to me. Let's go to Wikipedia.
Would also kind of fit with the name.
No, that's the KDE one. Trinity's KDE.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's based off 3.5.
Yep, sounds about right.
Sorry, I thought you were saying it was forked off of GTK.
Oh no, okay. Maybe I misspoke. No, I'm talking about like someone forked KDE3 because apparently that's a great user experience and people still want to use that. That's perfectly fine. See your point. But at the same time, like I see that on the other end of the spectrum, there are people that. This is like also a recurring topic. They kind of feel entitled to say what is and isn't good, like what developers should or should not do. Like if I am part of a group of developers that wants to change all user interfaces in their projects to, I don't know, red on pink, right? That's that's an idea. I'm not saying if it's good or not, but like, I am entitled to do that, and I don't think like as the developer, and I don't think that anyone can like come to me and say, "Well, I don't like it." Sure, you don't like it, but it's like my thing. Don't like it, fork it.
That's true. That's an exceptionally bad case where if the developer just if they actually want to do that, that's fine. But I think the most sound argument to make against that, ignoring anything else like I like the look or anything, just talk about accessibility, because that is a nightmare to look at for some people.
Okay, let's touch on accessibility for a very brief moment.
Okay, sure.
Accessibility is a problem, and it's a hard problem to solve, not just in the Linux realm, but like in general. And while I think that like we are pretty decently placed as far as like the toolkits and the tools that we use, we are not we're not on par with other platforms probably, but still deciding if you want to make a piece of software accessible or not is still very much in the realm of the developer's choice, right?
Yeah. No,
Like
absolutely.
if you're paying for it, that's like the conversation changes a little bit. But if you're not,
No, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think it depends on what your goal with the project is, right? If you're making something for yourself, right, and you're just putting it out there, you're like, okay, hey, if you want to, like, I've got a bookmark script, for example. It's written in Python. I know how it works. It's barely documented. If you want to add some documentation, I don't care. I don't need it. Go add it. But I never intended that for other people to actually use. So it's designed specifically around how I use it. I think things get a little bit weird when you're designing something. Obviously, it is still, at the end of the day, your choice as the developer, but things start to get a bit weird when you're designing something specifically with the intention that other people are going to be using it. This is obviously cases like KDE, GNOME, Critter, any software that's being developed not just because the devs want it, but because the devs are trying to solve a problem that other people also have.
Definitely, like the conversation changes slightly to the extent that if you actually want people to use this, you have to a certain extent to cater to their needs. But I doubt that that's the case for most open source projects out there. In particular, I'm thinking about like the things that I make, right? Most of the
Can you like give me
all
an
of the
example of something I
applications.
can bring up?
Oh, sure. I have been developing a number of applications, notoriously Feeds or G Feeds is an RSS reader. Hydropaper, it's like a wallpaper manager for multiple monitors for GNOME, and one that I am more recently heavily involved in is Envision. Envision is a VR app. For lack of a better term, it's an orchestrator to basically like click, build, and run Monado and all the accessory components to have open source VR. I haven't been very active in development as of late. I have been working my day job, so
Hey,
that's
you
unfortunate.
authored something 1 day ago. There's something.
I do still keep my I do stuff
Sure.
pretty much. I wouldn't say on a daily basis, but like I'm pretty active. It's just that my time is limited, and I like the stuff that I develop, and this like goes to further my point. The stuff that I develop is something that I do to scratch my own itch, right? And it's like I think it's like one of the fundamental pillars of free software. I want to scratch my own itch, and I do something because I am capable of doing it. And in doing so, I am also coincidentally scratching a bunch of people's itches, and that's kind of weird. But also, I think it's also a nice thing to do to, in a way, give back to the community if the community wants that thing that I'm making back, right? And like that's my perspective on like the whole like open source development stuff, right? And in particular, for these kind like, and this is like one example, because the other example is I'm doing this like, this is not my case, but like there are people that are lucky enough to do this professionally, where they get paid either in donations or like there's some company paying them to actually develop something. And at that point, you are trying, well, technically you should be trying to make the best interest of whoever's paying your bills, right? Be that your donors or patrons or the company that's actually paying you to do the particular job.
Well, I guess it depends on the terms of your specific contract, whether you're doing something for the company or they're employing you to specifically address the needs of the community. It depends on what you're doing.
I'm not talking like strictly legally, but like as a logical thing. Like if I'm receiving
you're being paid to do
donations
a
from
specific
randos,
bit of work.
Yeah. If I'm receiving donations for for like developing software in the open, then I am probably not contractually obligated to do anything. Like there's no legal thing binding me, right? But like there's just more of a moral or like we can say moral like binding there, that like if you don't respect it, you're not gonna get arrested or pay a fine or anything like that, but it's still like good practice, I'd say. Anyway, and I think that that's like a different argument that we can make, because like it becomes more complicated at that point. But like for most, I think that for most open source software out there, what you're gonna find is some random guy in their basement like doing work for free.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's I don't think that like bringing like opinions into that conversation in a certain way is necessarily useful. And I'm talking about like people harassing developers, or like people saying that, oh, this particular developer did things that I don't like, so they are bad, and therefore I will, I don't know, boycott them.
Right.
Okay, I'm not getting money anyways, but do your thing. Fortunately, that's not been the case for me, but like that's something that I've seen happen a lot online, unfortunately. And that's kind of sad, and that like discourages people from doing open source. And I think that to a certain extent, you like have to have a certain character not to be affected by this kind of stuff, or to like learn to ignore it, right? Just being online enough to know that there are just trolls out there. You don't have to feed the trolls.
Right. I think a lot of people, a lot of developers, like they shouldn't have to think about this, but they make the mistake of having a public persona. And when you have a public persona, it's going to lead to people who, I guess, take the criticism too far, right? Like there is a clear line between criticism and harassment, and there is a lot of people that like to scrape really, really close to that line. They like to peek the head over a little bit, you know. Obviously, there's the people out there who are just outright trolls, right? Those people, you know, they're gonna do what they do. Like those people, they're just out there. They can't be helped. But there are some people who, whether it's because they, you know, have a lack of social awareness, or they just talk in a certain way that gets them very close to that line. Like some people do cross that a bit, and if you're gonna exist in an online space, like you do need to definitely have a certain kind of character to know how to deal with that. I think that there's a lot of developers out there who it's basically impossible to contact them. They'll have like an email somewhere. Maybe they'll hang out in like matrices, but they don't have like a Mastodon. They don't have a Twitter. They don't have anything like that. They just do their thing, and that's basically it. I feel like that's probably a much like healthier,
saner way to do things.
Yeah, much healthier like mental place to be in, rather than like constantly getting involved in like it's one thing to have like discussions in a repo, but when things start getting big enough, they start expanding out of the repo. They'll start turning to Twitter threads and Reddit threads and Mastodon threads, and you know, eventually it just becomes this thing where, you know, everybody's talking about it. Obviously, I'm definitely part of that. I will talk about these things and I will, you know, shine a light on them. But I think even before that part happens, like some people still take it outside of the repos themselves. I'll see this quite often, especially in like Wayland discussions, for example. They get very heated. People start having discussions about it outside of Mastodon, outside of GitLab, and you know, when you're outside of the GitLab, people start throwing, you know, things around more casually, start like, you know, whatever, insulting people because they're not actually tagging them, so they assume they're never going to see it. And that's the sort of the thing about social media. You're posting it publicly, so it's probably going to make its way to the person you think is not going to see it.
I think that that's kind of intentional, but that's
sure,
just
yeah, definitely
cents.
for some people. But I think that there are other people out there who, like, just that like a lapse of judgment. Maybe they just don't assume there's gonna go any further than that. Maybe they don't specifically mention a name, so it's like very vague, but then the person still finds it anyway. You know, social media is just weird. It makes everything just messy.
Yeah, it enlarges the social issues that we have in real life, because if you have a person in front of you, you're not gonna well, some people might, but like typically if you're saying, you're not gonna throw shit at them like out of nowhere. Anyways,
there.
Yeah. So yeah, a little bit, but I think that that's useful for the entire conversation. It's not like so yeah, anyway, we were like, one thing that I would like to touch on is in particular the whole debacle around GTK4 and Libadwaita and not supporting themes and all that, right? that's a conversation that like kind of speaks to me, because I have been a script kiddie myself. I have been customizing my Linux desktop back in the GNOME 2 days with obnoxious themes and broken icon themes. I've done all of that, and people still keep doing that. And I think that that's amazing to a certain extent, because like it shows some form of creativity and like will of self-expression. And like as long as users do that, I'm totally fine with that. And in particular, like just as a general thing, there's this misconception, or well, it's not a misconception, it's like an actual thing, but anyway, GTK 3 and 4 and Libadwaita do not support themes. They just, they do have something that resembles a theme engine there. That's like like you can inject CSS into applications, but that's very much not it. Like it has been used for theming, but it's not a theming thing. In particular, it's used, as far as I know, it's used mostly for like the accessibility themes, so the high contrast stuff, and also used by developers to make custom looking widgets in their applications. And it's actually like being able to use CSS for that. I think it's actually pretty awesome, because everyone knows, well, most of everyone knows CSS.
It's pretty easy to learn if you don't.
Yeah, I mean, and like it's made specifically for that styling stuff, right? Want to add border, like making something look like a card, stuff like that. So that's an API that exists, and people like in the GNOME 3 or well GTK 3 era have used that quite successfully, I'd say, for theming. So changing the default appearance of applications. And again, as far as the user, as long as the user does it, it's perfectly fine. Like you're messing with your system, you're perfectly fine to do that. But the moment that someone like a company making distribution, like doesn't have to be a company, you know, like a distribution does it, right? Yeah. Say Ubuntu wants to apply their orange and purple branding to applications. At that point, you're kind of like walking a fine line here, because those toolkits don't really support that, right? It's as if like as if you were like a manufacturer for a computer, let's say like a random brand, right? Making laptops, and you decided like the Windows installation that you ship has to have the Windows logo changed with the brand logo, right? That's just something dumb. Well, first off, there are licensing agreements that prevent you from doing that, but also you're gonna break a lot of stuff for doing that. Even just changing like the little Windows logo, people are gonna look for the start button, like the Windows button, and they're not gonna find it, and they're gonna complain. They're gonna say, "Oh, Windows is crap, and it's difficult." They changed the start button. Well, they they can have reasons to say that Windows is crap, but that wouldn't be a good reason. Because what happens is that the user, without knowing it, has their user experience completely broken by an mostly aesthetic choice that was out of the control of the original developer, right? Again, as long as you, the user, are the one making the change, that's perfectly fine, because you know that you touched the thing, right? But the moment you're like, when that's not the case, then you're just breaking you're breaking the user experience. And what happens at that point with open source software? It happens that, like, I don't know, Ubuntu. I keep like using Ubuntu as an example. I have no particularly bad feelings for Ubuntu,
well,
apart from Snap.
Ubuntu, what they ship isn't really GNOME, because they like to like backport specific patches as well. Like it's this weird like amalgamation thing.
That's also something that is well within the realm of what they can do, but I wish they would do differently. I'll maybe touch on that later. Anyway, let's say like they break something, they change an icon that doesn't look like what it was supposed to be, and it doesn't work anymore for applications, right? What happens at that point? The user's gonna look at that particular application and say, "Oh, this application is broken. Let me go file an issue." And you're gonna see an issue filed for a problem that was not caused by you and that you have no control over. And what I've seen happen in these cases is what I think is the best solution is say, this is not my problem, I won't fix it. Go complain to Ubuntu or whatever else might be the case. The other thing that I've seen is the developer of the application puts in a specific like rule so that if a certain condition is met, the application is going to behave differently. So it's basically like creating more and more complexity in the application. And what happens to that, and I have been I have done that in the past. Like for example, at some point I tried to cater to people that didn't like client-side decoration aesthetically.
We definitely talk about that a bit as well. That's a big one.
Yeah, that's a thing where I have a little less of a strong opinion. Well, I have an opinion, but it's okay. Let's
get to that.
I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyways, so I at some point like put in support like a toggle for having server-side decorations in feeds. I think it was back when it was still GTK3, and I kept doing that for more and more things. And it's at a certain point, the settings menu for feeds was just like a bunch of random dials that, like, it didn't make any sense. And like on top of that, that's just like the tip of the iceberg, because on top of that, I suddenly had a bunch of edge cases that I had to think about, where my application was not behaving right or outright just breaking because there was some combination of options that I didn't test for, right? So it became more and more of a burden, to the point that basically I was having difficulties doing anything to the application. I couldn't touch it because it would break. And at that point it clicked. User preference is difficult. It's not a given thing that you should be able to change everything. And at some point, you either decide to stop development and like just have it like this and not touch it anymore, or you just start removing stuff that you don't want. Right? You start like create like working around a particular vision that you have, and you just stop like wasting precious resources chasing around random people that want this or that different, right?
Sure.
And to that extent, I feel that the same argument can be made for what's been done with Libadwaita. Because with Libadwaita, like it or not, like the styling being flat and all, very much a stylistic choice. Like people have different preferences. That's fine. Anyway, that's like the direction that the GNOME developers or the developers behind Libadwaita wanted to make. That was an agreed on choice. The people actually putting in the work to develop the thing, and that would have benefit from that particular library, agreed basically on what was and wasn't desirable, and they just did a thing. And at this point, with Libadwaita and GTK4, I can happily say that in my experience, GTK4 is with Libadwaita is one of the best toolkits for developing desktop applications, period. Why is that? Because it's straightforward enough. You have like complex widgets that are already made for you that you can just use with very little work put on it, and you can have a sleek looking application without having to either be a designer and like making your own design decisions, or without having to like put in the work needed to have some certain thing work in a certain way. And I like back in the GTK3 days, that was the case for some things. There were some like applications doing some fancy stuff that like you as a developer, if you wanted to implement that as well, like I see, I don't know, just to say a random thing, the Pi spinning like a Pi thing in Nautilus for like when you're doing file transfers. There's like a loader that looks like a Pi that gets filled up as the transfer.
Sure.
Yep. Okay, something like that. I'm not sure about GTK4. It's a little bit different in the latest Nautilus. But anyway, back in GTK3, that particular thing, if you wanted it in your application, you had to implement it yourself. Like your best bet was like going through the Nautilus source code and possibly copying some stuff around if your application was made in C. Otherwise, you would have to translate it to whatever language you were using. And that's not necessarily a great thing, particularly like if you want to make an application that not just functions well, but that also looks looks good to your particular taste.
Mhm.
Having stuff like this, I think, makes a big difference, and that's what like makes platform applications pretty to look at, like nice to use and stuff like that. And that's I could say that's the example for stuff like Android and iOS to a certain extent, where you do have this kind of stuff, right?
Mhm.
That's also the case for things like Kirigami. As far as I know, they are doing basically most of the same things. Of course, the design vision is different, the implementation is totally different, but the idea is very much that same one. And the implementation, I must say, is actually quite good. I don't develop Qt or Kirigami, but I do use some Kirigami apps, and I think that they look good. I prefer personally the Libadwaita styling, but that's like totally beside the point.
Sure.
When you go back to something like GTK or even to some extent Qt,
Mhm.
as far as I know, you don't have all that stuff,
Mhm.
right? Or like if you want to go even more like custom made, something like Electron, right? Because in Electron, you're just making a website.
Right.
Like the interface is a website. Using web technologies, you don't have anything.
Well, at that point, you do have access to CSS frameworks, which
you do have access
may
to CSS,
offer,
but
depending on CSS framework specifically, which may offer you something akin to that. It's not as clean, but there is certainly something there with the web.
But mostly that's not designed for making applications, though.
Sure,
that's designed for
that's
websites.
Fair. Yeah, okay,
that can work for some things. Like material design is like it or not, works fairly well for both websites and applications, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good example. But still, at that point, you're not gonna theme it because it doesn't support like user theming.
Mm-hmm.
And like the same example can be done for stuff like proprietary applications for once. Like for example, Steam is one proprietary application that we all know and love, particularly in the Linux community. Steam technically supports Steam's sort of. It's like I haven't ever used the theme for Steam that worked actually without breaking anything. So that's not non-themable. And like if you even just move to the proprietary operating system scene, right? Android, iOS, Mac OS, Windows, are any of those themable except for maybe a dark preference or an accent color?
Not on General Oasis, no.
So.
At least without not going and like doing some weird breaking stuff. It's not intended.
Oh yeah, Windows users will go out of the way to have a shortcut to, I don't know, stop automatic updates, something like that. Something.
It's not
I
the
don't use
intended
Windows.
behavior. Yeah.
Oh sure, and that's fine for most people. And as far it may be annoying that, for example, I don't like the obnoxious white of the light theme of Windows. That's a lucky thing that I don't use Windows. But regardless, from time to time, I find myself using someone else's computer, and I just open the file manager and like I go blind for 5 seconds. So that's the thing. But there's nothing you can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, again, something you might or might not like, but that's within the realm of the decisions that the developer takes.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the lucky thing we have in the Linux space is that, for one, if we don't like something, if it's open source, we can fork it, we can make it our own. And that's very much what like recently the Linux Mint people started doing with X apps. I think we can touch more on that later.
Yeah, but I did want to touch on some stuff that you like. Unless you want to, there's more you want to say on this point.
Go ahead. I'm going on a rant at this point.
No, I think you were talking for like 15 minutes straight.
Sorry about that.
No, it's so good. It's so good. I was trying to find a point to get a word in, but it was not going to happen. So about, I don't know, 10 minutes ago or so, there were two topics that you sort of blended together that I think do need to be split apart clearly, because they are very clearly different things. That is application theming and icon theming, because these are two very distinct things. And icon theming does have a very specific like XDG specification where this actually does exist. There is a definition for what icon theming is. The whole GTK CSS stuff, that's, you know, that's a different thing. Which direction do you want to go down first?
I think we can go down the icon theming thing, although I will warn you that I know about the controversy around it.
I have a 25-minute video coming out soon about it. It's insane what was going on in those threads.
I know it's quite bad, and I've experienced it firsthand. I know that if you have GNOME icon themes and KDE icon things to get, like if you want to use Qt and GTK apps together, you're gonna go into some issues unless you do some steps to prevent that.
GNOME is in the process of basically doing away with icon themes. Not entirely, but there is a lot of developers on the project who don't like icon themes specifically because of QA and it's basic QA, actually. That's the main thing. You cannot assume that the user is going to have the correct icons available, and you cannot assume that the icons they are going to have available are going to fit your like UX design that you're going for. So GNOME apps are designed around Adwaita. If you do not have Adwaita, that's not our problem. And I know with GTK 5, there is some discussions about completely doing away with the architecture entirely and just not even allowing the ability, at least with Libadwaita stuff, not even allowing the ability to change the icon theme. There's still some discussion about whether there should be some fallback there or some different solution there for the more generic use cases, but specifically the GNOME usage, there is a discussion about completely ditching that ability.
I mean, it's basically the same argument, the same thing that we've been talking about up to this point, I think. Mostly, yeah, QA is a thing. You have to make sure that your stuff doesn't break when you use a different configuration. At some point, that becomes like too much of a burden to deal with. And I think that it does make sense, and to some extent we've already seen it happen in the GDK development sphere, where you basically have applications such as icon library. That's basically like a developer aid application where you have a bunch of icons, like symbolic icons, that you can include in your application, and some of them are like system icons, and those are like the theme icons, and the vast majority of them are actually bespoke icons, or like I would say GNOME HEG icons, possibly, that you can include in your application, bundle it with your application, and like ship it. And I have been doing that. That's actually a pretty nice thing to have, like a pretty nice tool, because particularly when you need some specific icon that no one has needed before you have nothing, so we will need to include an icon, and like having a straightforward process to do that is kind of interesting. I think that this is a good move. It's less of a good move considering the other quote unquote legacy applications, or even if you don't want to think about like older GTK stuff, you can think about Qt stuff, you can think about other toolkits.
Well, the issue that happened in that thread is Adwaita is not, it's by definition not a correct icon theme anymore. They specifically do not include certain icons and only include a symbolic version, whereas at this point the spec does not currently support symbolic icons. That's the discussion they are having, and they are, like, everyone's in favor of adding them. KDE likes symbolic icons, and GNOME likes them, so they might as well be in the spec. But they weren't in the spec already, and that meant that there's some applications that are requesting the non-symbolic version, and if Adwaita is set as the default theme, so this, I think the example they used was Kate. If Adwaita is set as the default theme, which it would be on Fedora, for example, that application is just missing a ton of icons because it cannot find them in Adwaita because the theme just doesn't have those icons anymore. And this, like I'm totally fine with what GNOME is doing in like internally in their ecosystem, but when those issues start like leaking out into other applications that a user might want to install on their system, like installing Kate's a weird one, but you might want to install, I don't know, like there's going to be some application out there, Kdenlive. I don't know if Kdenlive supports icon theme.
Kdenlive, I think they moved to like forcing their own icon thing.
That makes sense.
Icon theme at some. I think that's like most Qt apps are like, if you use GNOME, most Qt apps in my experience are broken, or at least I have never been able to make Qt apps.
Do you want to know why they're broken? It's because they don't. It's finally become a discussion because of this. They are making Breeze a hard dependency. Why it wasn't this entire time, I could not tell you, but they're finally doing it.
I know. The only problem is that I haven't been able to set Breeze as the preferred Qt theme on anything but Plasma, and that's mildly annoying, particularly when you cannot stand Fusion, the Fusion theme. Anyway, yeah, I think that the icon problem is very, very impacting on the community and the general usage of the Linux desktop, whatever it is for you. But at the same time, I think that it's not very nice to say, but I think that at some point it becomes an argument of you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs.
Sure.
I think that some particular topics move too slowly to be effective unless you start breaking stuff. The moment you start breaking stuff, I think things go into sort of an emergency mode and things start moving back again. Like, okay.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
It's like an unholy grease for the wheels of random maintainers. I wish these certain topics would move faster or in a more agile sort of fashion. But unfortunately, again, it's very much the case of most of these people have other priorities if they are actively working on that particular project, or if they're like random contributors or even like frequent contributors, but it's not their primary day job. It's hard. It's hard to keep up with all this stuff.
Right. Well, it's especially hard when you're dealing with these meta level repos like Wayland, for example, or XDG specs, where it's not one desktop's goal. Like when you're dealing with something in GNOME, right? Like I've said this with someone else before, but when you're dealing with a GNOME problem, you can all agree on some fundamental truths. Like, we're gonna use GTK. We don't particularly like application theming. We use Adwaita for everything. Like, those things, no one's gonna argue that in the GNOME project. At least they probably won't, unless they have some time they want to waste. But when you're dealing with something like XDG, you're dealing with Wayland, you're dealing with any of these meta-level repos, it's not just, this is what GNOME wants, it's, here's what KDE wants, here's what WL-Roots want, here's what Cosmic wants, and maybe there is some things you agree with, and oftentimes, KDE and Cosmic might have similar intentions, but WL-Roots, they're trying to make a generic library. They're not even shipping half the XDG portals, for example, because it just doesn't fit with what they're doing. They expect the downstreams that are implementing something with WL-Roots to do it themselves. And whenever you're dealing with something like this, it's going to lead to these sort of rough edges in the discussions and things that they just frankly don't move very quickly. Like that's the simplest way to put it. We've all seen the Wayland discussions where it's like 5 years this protocol has been in discussion, and it's not like 5 years it's been stalled. It's been 5 years like active on and off discussion. And I have noticed that with Red Hat being like, so we're gonna stop doing the whole Xorg thing after Rel 7. There's now a deadline to when Red Hat does not care about X11 anymore. And that, I have noticed, has sort of, as soon as that happened, a lot of those protocol discussions, which I thought would have taken multiple years, have taken multiple months, or in some cases, like multiple weeks.
Some developers at NVIDIA at some point, I think, got like a random earbleed when Red Hat announced that, just like out of the blue. Someone in NVIDIA had a stroke because they suddenly had to
Oh
support.
yeah, there's a whole NVIDIA stuff
That's
as well. Yeah,
fucking weird.
They, out of nowhere, like, oh yeah, okay, we good, let's go. It just works now. Apparently, I've not tested them myself, but 555 on desktops that have the explicit sync patch. Apparently, it's perfect. Like, there's no issues.
Apparently,
I
I haven't used NVIDIA for a while, but
yeah.
I mean, for what I know, you still have a bunch of random problems with NVIDIA, but you do have random problems with AMD as well. So
sure,
there's hate to go for every big manufacturer out there.
But the whole your screen is flickering, that issue has sort of gone away, and that's a big one if you ask me.
Particularly if you're photosensitive, I wouldn't imagine how fun that would be.
Mm.
It's like ER roulette. Every time you open Steam, you don't know if you're gonna go to the ER, if you're gonna end up playing video games.
Yeah, we love race conditions where they completely random if it's gonna happen. No, good luck, enjoy, have fun. So, yeah, was there anything more you want to say on the icon stuff, or can we?
I honestly don't have much to say. I think that like a rework on the spec is probably a good idea, but I also think that applications shipping their own icons is also probably a better idea. It's kind of annoying because now you also, as a developer, you also have to bundle in icons where previously you didn't necessarily have to. But I think it's one of those like necessary annoyances where your application overall is going to function better. And again, we already have examples of applications that, without being forced to do that, do that, because either they don't have the icon available or they just want to make sure that it works well on every system.
The icon theme thing is weird because you are definitely right. Whether it's they have their own custom specific theme or they hard depend on something like, I don't know, Breeze icon theme or Adwaita, whatever they choose fits with their application design. I think you are right there that it makes sense to do that. And a lot of applications simply just don't have any icon theming infrastructure. Like, I think Electron, if you wanted to interact with the desktop icon theme, you would have to build your own infrastructure for it. That's just not a thing in Electron. And then a lot of applications that are built in GTK and Qt don't actually interact with it anyway. Like GIMP is a good example, but you know, GIMP is not a GTK application anymore. It's like GTK weird, whatever they've done to GTK2 to keep it functioning all these years.
Well, it's GTK as in the old GIMP toolkit, not the GNOME toolkit as GTK now is, basically.
But there's a lot of other applications which just don't interact with this infrastructure. But then we have desktops like XFCE, we have desktops like KDE, we have desktops like Mint, where they still do heavily rely on the icon theming for their internal applications. And like I get what you're saying, that we should have, it's better to have a default icon theme ship with the application, but I don't think these desktops are going to move away from this, or at least move away from it being customizable to the user.
Or being a global thing, right?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so about these desktops, these outlier desktops, let's just call them that. XFCE, Mint or Cinnamon, and LXQt is the other one that comes to mind. They are desktops that are built on technologies that exist beyond their projects, right? XFCE is built on GTK.
Supports icon theming, so
well, for now,
sure,
for now they do, right? And like at some point, I'm pretty sure that at some point you're gonna have like a fallback system where, yeah, GNOME doesn't support system icons, but I'm pretty sure that something will be implemented where, okay, you still have a legacy icon theme that your applications can use, because, like, being real, some applications are not going to be updated to include icons, to bundle icons, and you're just going to have to make do with what you have. And anyway, I was saying those desktops, I think that they exist. They do not exist in a vacuum. They are not making their own toolkit, and the toolkit is basically developed by third parties. What for them are third parties, right? Possibly some LXQt developer is also a Plasma or Qt developer, or the other way for XFCE, right? But it stands like the what I mean to say is they either need to adapt to the changes as if they were any other application developer, or they will fork and go their own way. And that's very much what XApps, as far as I understand, is trying to do, forking off of GTK3 for their own applications. And I think that that's like an interesting thing. But at the same time, it also kind of makes me kind of sad, because they're losing on so much stuff that's been going on in GTK4 just for I'm sure it's not just about theming. It's probably also about other stuff that I am not aware of. But like, what I think would be the better option here would be the following. So GTK in and of itself, so like GTK4 is not married to Libadwaita. Libadwaita is its own project. You can very well use GTK4 without Libadwaita, and that's fine. What you can do is build something that basically competes with Libadwaita on top of GTK4. Basically a widget and style library. And if you want, you can also have that support themes. Who's stopping you at that point, right? I think that would be a better option. Definitely the one that would require more developer effort. But if they are, I don't want to say if they're serious about it. I'm pretty sure that they are serious about their decision right now. I just want to say, I think it would be a better option to start from GTK4 and work together with upstream instead of forking upstream in this particular scenario, because GTK4 is not going anywhere. Again, not married to Libadwaita. Plus, like, GTK4 has a bunch of stuff that many other toolkits don't have. Like, for example, being GPU accelerated. For better or for worse, that's a huge deal compared to like more traditional toolkits like GTK3. And like I don't think that most Electron apps are GPU accelerated. Maybe some are. Probably depends on like what version of Chromium it's based on. Anyway, yeah. So I think that they will go ahead with their thing. I hope it has a better success than XApps have had up to this point. But if any Mint or XFC if any developer that's involved with XApps is listening, think about maybe working on your own Libadwaita-like library that respects your desktop vision, that respects what you're trying to do. Because GTK4 is I think it is has the right tooling around it to do that. And you can clone Libadwaita, like remove all the stuff and add your own. I think if we want to be very like skunkworks about it. And I think that the users will also benefit from that. Also because like it's not just about being GPU accelerated. It's about like actual stuff that that's different in the API from 3 to 4. And like if you're still based on upstream GTK4, you're not gonna need to like update your APIs and like make changes to the code yourself, because GTK3, as far as I know, maybe it has some maintenance patches, but as far as I know, it's not. It's like its development is done. We moved on to GTK4. We're already looking ahead to GTK5. So I think that the GTK3 ship has sailed a very long time at this point. And as a developer that has used GTK3, I'd say good riddance. It was a good toolkit for the time. GTK4, I think, is much better for the developer and also for the user in a number of ways. It's not perfect. Nothing's perfect. But I think it's very, very good for what it is.
So regarding the whole GTK3, GTK4 thing, I've not seen him clarify this. I need to have a proper conversation with Clem. He says that somebody has forked GTK3. I know there are a bunch of forks out there, like on the like April update thread where they were talking about the XApp thing. I read through the comments. He mentioned there was a fork. I don't know if that's a fork they're using. Again, he's not properly clarified it, so I can't comment on that. Now, the whole moving to GTK4 thing, this is something like Clem would have to properly specify himself. Like, this is just me going from what I can see him saying. His reason for not wanting to move up is, it's a very Mint reason, and it's a very, you expect this sort of answer from Mint. that GTK 3 took a long time to get to the point where they were ready to move to it, and they're just happy now, and they want to enjoy GTK 3 for a bit before moving up to GTK 4, which is not, an answer that, most users are going to like really care about, but it's a very like Mint likes to move very, very slowly with their changes, and that's Mint doing their thing. But as for the whole moving to GTK 4 thing, my understanding for why Clem doesn't want to do that is he's unsure about the future, I guess the future direction of GTK, not the whole specifically Libadwaita, but the toolkit itself. And we did briefly touch on the whole idea of GTK being agnostic toolkit before, but there's issues that Clem specifically brought up, like this was opened up 3 years ago. It's got a GTK 5 label now. There's still some discussion about maybe doing it. Removing the GTK theme name setting from the toolkit entirely. There's the issue where they are considering maybe dropping the X11 backend. That is, like, neither of these are confirmed at this point. You have issues with GTK isn't... I believe they still haven't changed this. Let me just double check. Cursor shape, Wayland, GTK. I believe that they are not interested in supporting the cursor shape protocol, which is going to allow you to do compositor-side cursor themes, because they don't want to support it in GNOME. So there's issues like that where, like, do you have something to say there?
No, I'm just wondering, compositor set cursor theming?
Yeah, it's a relatively is there a chat on here? Can I? Yes, there is. How do I send it? So instead of doing I might have badly explained it, but it's basically a different way of doing cursor themes. The exact details don't exactly matter, at least for right now. And they're not opposed to getting it into Mutter, but there's no interest from... It would be like, if somebody wants to get it into Mutter from outside of the project, they would maybe possibly consider it, but I think you are... Like, you do make a good point about moving up to GTK 4 and then going from there. I think their concern is just where the toolkit's going to go in the future, and whether or not that future is aligning with what they're going to do at a core toolkit level, not the whole adding things onto it. I think right now, it probably makes more sense to move to GTK 4 and make their own version of Libadwaita. I think you are right there, but that's not the direction that they seem to want to be interested in.
I think that these are perfectly valid concerns. At the same time, I would say they are a big portion of the developers that use these kind of toolkits, right? Mm. They could, I don't know if they have tried or not, but what I would do is try to get into the conversation and try to understand together with the GTK developers what's like the current state of things, what's like this, even like the suggested way of going forward, because I suggested the like mint flavored Libadwaita, but that's my idea. Maybe there's like a better way.
Well, they want to do with the X apps thing. They sort of want to have they want to make these generic X applications, so maybe it wouldn't be mint flavored. I think if they were to do something, adding their own theming system into it would make the most sense there.
Yeah, mint flavored sounded better than X flavored, also because X is kind of ambiguous these days. We have three-way ambiguous because we have X apps, we have X11, and we have whatever Twitter has become. So yeah, mint flavored. Anyways, I think that like it would be beneficial to like get into the conversation about like what we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish, why we think like using GTK 4 might be a good idea or might not be a good idea, and like asking for a confrontation about these topics with people that are actually like involved in decisions for GTK moving forward. You like the thing about like having or not having this or that feature is definitely like a concern that I haven't considered, and that's why like I'm reconsidering these as well. But at the same time, like I'm thinking about the end user, right? It's not great to have like GTK3 apps have some missing functionality that is just too bad to lose, right? Just for the sake of having a different desktop, because at the end of the day, like you're this like imaginary new Linux user, if it ever if they exist, that are just going to go to the Linux shop and buy the Linux computer. They're gonna have like if they happen to land on something that runs Mint, they're gonna have a different experience from someone that runs Fedora, for example, right? And if that that experience might be just different, or it might be actively worse. Like for example, if you are running, like if you're rendering your GUI with a graphics card, it stands to. I don't have numbers about this, but like it stands to reason that it's more efficient just because the GPU is designed to draw pixels around.
I think that's not controversial at all. GPU draws graphics, yes.
Yes. I would think that like you might get you will probably get better performance if they implement the change, right? You might also get better battery life. You might get like smoother animations. You might get a better experience with high frame rate monitors, stuff like that. While on the other hand, if you're using still GTK3, you're going to waste a lot of system resources just to draw a window because the CPU has to do it, right? And we're not even touching about stuff that even to this day GTK still kind of struggles about, like pick lists, right? That's the thing that it is problematic, and it like for like I have made at least 3 applications that rely on big lists that grow and never stop. They are virtually infinite, and big lists are definitely a big problem in GTK still to this day. It was much worse in GTK 3. It's somewhat better in GTK 4, but still very much not a solved problem. They like users are gonna miss out. If you have a GTK3 app with too many rows in a list box or too many icons in a folder view, it's gonna crash. Who knows if it's gonna bring the system down with it. So this is the kind of stuff I'm thinking about, and like,
oh, we lose him.
The technology's sake, right?
Sorry, we cut out for a moment there.
Oh, what did you left?
Oh,
hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Okay, we good.
Okay, we're back.
I think.
Are we?
It looked, your video and voice is desynced, but it looks like it's fine. So just try.
Okay, test 1 2 3. Can you hear me?
Okay, we're good. I don't know what happened. It works. Cool.
We're good.
I think.
Okay,
so.
Great. Magic. That's the explanation. Okay. What was I saying? I'm okay. So the thinking about the users is a thing. I like. There's a part of me that also thinks about the technology because, like, me being a big nerd, I like to always be on the latest and greatest because I think it's just reasonable. That might not necessarily be the case. Particularly, like I'm thinking, we took a long time to move to GTK3. We want to enjoy it before moving on. That's totally reasonable, and like I understand that that's the same idea of banks just moving off of Windows XP finally to Windows 7, the new hotness right now. No, but like jokes aside, again, it's a matter of how much time you're going to invest in one thing or another, because you might want to chase the latest version of GTK, or you might want to chase the actual feature set that you want to implement. And like time is not infinite, and at some point you just have to decide on what to invest on. So it's reasonable, but at the same time, if you really don't have that much time to move on to GTK 4, do you have time to keep maintaining GTK 3 on your own? That's part of what I'm thinking here.
I don't think it's a matter of not having time to move on. It's just not wanting to move users on too quickly. It's wanting to move these changes out, but move them out very gradually. And like this sort of goes into their whole like not having Wayland support yet. Like them even attempting to implement Wayland is only a very, very recent addition. This is not just on Cinnamon, but on Mate. Budgie is just very recently getting their Wayland stuff done, but Joshua is a crazy person and is getting it working in a year. I don't believe him. I've not I don't believe he's going to get it done, but he thinks he's going to get it done. But
Wellness support is a massive undertaking, and
yeah,
definitely it's definitely something a little bit more involved than just migrating from one version to another of your toolkit,
sure. But like the point I was getting at there was like Mint, especially Mint, moves very slowly with their changes. Like they want to be something where, you know, it still looks like Windows 7, right? Like if you used Mint 10 years ago and you use Mint today, there will be some changes, sure, but it's not going to be like using GNOME 10 years ago and GNOME today. Like you will very much notice a difference instantly.
Definitely, definitely, and there's value behind that. Don't get me wrong, but I would decouple like UX design from the actual like underneath the stuff that's under the hood, because you can still very much make something that looks and feels like Windows 95 on, I don't know, GTK 4, for example, if you really wanted to. Anyways, yeah, that's basically my 2 cents on the old situation. Like in general, having more quote unquote competition on these core apps is valuable, because it's going to give users more choice, and besides, it's going to create an environment where these desktops that do very much still have their niche, like XFC, LexQt, and Mate and Cinnamon, this could give them like a way to effectively have a core set of applications that they have a say on where they're going, like development wise.
What the reason why I am very much in favor of what Mint is doing here is because, and I totally get what you're saying, but the reason I'm in favor of them doing this is the same reason why I'm in favor of what Cosmic is doing, where the people on Mint and the people on Cosmic, they, whether they're right or wrong, they've very much had a dislike of the direction that they see GNOME and GTK going, especially, you know, Cosmic, where Cosmic specifically wants their stuff to look the way they want it to look, and if you're going to be building, basically what Cosmic was before was GNOME with plugins, like it's going to look like GNOME, and that makes sense because it is GNOME, but they've had these issues with the direction things are going, and instead of just saying, okay, we're going to sit here and just like complain about it, we're going to sit here and just like say how bad GNOME is, how bad GTK is, they've decided that they're going to sit down and actually do something about it. It's not going and getting involved in the upstream, like involved in GTK, involved in GNOME, like maybe you would like them to do, but they've decided something they want to do, and in Mint's case, they're doing a fork. In Cosmic's case, they're making a whole new desktop, which is kind of like, from what I can see, this sort of middle ground between GNOME and GTK, where it frankly looks fairly GTK and GNOME and KDE. I'm misspeaking really badly today. Where it looks very much GNOME inspired, but it has a lot more customization, and they're not starting where we were in 1998. They're building off of what a modern desktop is today and taking the best parts of GNOME, the best parts of KDE, and building what they feel like is the best desktop for their users. And even if what you see Mint doing or what you see System 76 doing with Cosmic is not what you would like them to be doing, at least I think we can appreciate the fact that they are doing something to solve their issues with what they see GNOME and GTK doing.
I think that the situation for Cosmic and System 76 is a bit different, similar in many ways, now that you mention it, but it's also very different because They did try to get involved with upstream at some point. That didn't go well for a variety of reasons I do not want to touch on. But regardless, they decided what they were going to do next, and they did. And what they are doing is different, in my opinion, because they're not like staying locked in old stuff that they are going to need to maintain. They're moving on to completely
if you want to talk about
different stuff.
Newest of the new, they're doing Rust GUI development. Like, that's, if you want to talk about new, that is a very, very immature ecosystem. They are the reason right now there is, like, Rust GUI stuff happening, really. Like, the toolkits were there already, but before System 76 came in, it was not in a great state. Like, you look at the toolkit they're using, and now all of the top contributors are people from System 76. Like, they have been heavily, heavily investing both time, money, and also code into actually getting this up to a state where you legitimately can build a desktop with a Rust GUI.
Yeah, and I think that's great. Like for the latest project that I've been working on in Vision, it initially started on Iced, which I believe it is the same one that the Cosmic people are using. I didn't like it at one single bit as a developer, and also I didn't like the styling, but that's a different thing. What can I say? I mean, GTK has been there for a long time, and I also have been developing on it for a while, so I am very well biased. But at the same time, I am really happy to see something new coming out, because like prior to these new next gen, let's call them that, Rust based toolkits, we only had good old Qt and GTK and maybe WX widgets. It's somewhere
Electron.
there.
Let's build all our apps in Electron.
Yeah,
Electron-based desktop environment.
You give me shivers.
There are web-based ones, so it's totally possible.
Yeah, like the thing that Synology has in their NAS. No, yeah, don't. Well, there are fair uses for it. Like if you want to use it on a browser, it kind of makes sense. But like, you're gonna use a desktop. You're gonna use a desktop. You don't want to have a browser. They're just like sucking resources
Discount
infinitely
Chrome OS.
until it crashes. Discard OS, yeah. Anyway, I like the idea behind the Iced. I'm happy to see it move forward. And I'm happy to see something that's not based on, like, that's not written in C or C++, because that's also gonna bring a lot more developers like working on the actual toolkit. And like, I am fairly young, so I like am not so well versed in C development or C++ development. But what I can tell you is that for all the flack that Rust gets for being hard, it's way easier than C. I can tell you that for sure. And I think that that's gonna be a net positive in general, because even if Cosmic is not gonna go anywhere, I'm pretty sure the ICE project will go somewhere, or if not it directly, some fork of it, and we'll have new tools to build stuff around. And I think that that's great, because like at the end of the day, the more choice you have, well, I'm second guessing myself, but like having choice, to a certain extent, having choice is good. And like right now, if you want to build a native GUI, like you have only basically two choices, then that's not great.
Oh, you know, if you want to build it with like the native X11 stuff, there's also that. You shouldn't.
Isn't X11 dead? Is that a meme or?
Oh, there's X.
Is it ever gonna die?
X-Wayland's not going anywhere.
I am afraid so.
Well, actually, this is completely like off topic, but I kind of wonder what your take on this is. X-Wayland has sort of acted like a crutch for Wayland. It's, for so long we've had X-Wayland here, and things just haven't had to be dealt with, because a lot of issues just simply don't exist if you run the application in X-Wayland. It doesn't solve everything, but a lot of the protocols we're only very recently seeing, like a good example being the the icon protocol that's just getting resolved a couple of days ago, where like child windows can set a different icon from the parent window. This just didn't have to be this just didn't have to be thought of because you just run the application in Xwayland and it just does it. But I've heard some people say that if Xwayland just didn't exist and we were forced to actually deal with these problems natively in Wayland, years and years ago, maybe we would be a lot further along. I don't know what your thought on that is.
Okay, I'll consult my crystal ball and tell you what this alternative universe would look like. No, but seriously, this is an argument that exists not only for Wayland and X-Wayland, but exists for a lot of other things. It's the same argument for Proton, right? Exactly the same, because you're building something with a compatibility layer that's basically like you're relying on this compatibility layer to the point that you don't really have to deal with the problem. So you can use the different thing, but also kind of not use it. And like there are still things that are very much an issue. That's true. I don't think that, like, personally, this is just a guess because I have no way of knowing, but I don't think that we'd be much further off with Wayland if we didn't have X-Wayland. For a very long time, even like the biggest projects that have been proponents to Wayland have relied on X-Wayland. Like GTK3 is a good example. I don't know if GTK3 has a native Wayland backend.
It
Maybe
does.
not.
It was when it's towards the end of GTK3 they added it. It's obviously nowhere near as developed as the GTK4 version, but it definitely does exist there.
Would make sense. And like in general, like I think that you have too much legacy stuff to not have this kind of compatibility layer. And that's at the end of the day, X-Wayland has been developed by the same people that have been developing Wayland. So made sense to them, makes sense to me. That's basically the thing. It's true that it like slows things down because you have the excuse to not deal with the problem, but at the same time, I wouldn't deal with the opposite, to be honest.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I just wanted to get your take on it. I like asking people that question. It's always a fun one to see what they have to say about it. I'm pretty much in like a similar boat with it. Think of things like browsers, right? Like browsers only very recently are starting to get. Well, I think Firefox only recently enabled their Wayland backend by default. Maybe I'm thinking of Chromium, but
they've had it for a while. Yeah. They enabled it by default very recently, but they've had it for a while.
Maybe things would have been dealt with quicker, and maybe there would have been more of a push to get some of these problems resolved. But I don't know. It's really hard to say what would have happened. I think what you would have seen is there would have been a lot slower of an adoption because you would lose out on so much of like what already exists. Anything prior to GTA 3 just wouldn't work anymore. I don't know when QT added their Wayland backend, but probably anything 4 or below would
implementation of the Wayland backend in Qt. I can tell you that much. It's still, I wouldn't say it's very broken, but it's still kind of rough around the edges.
We'd lose the entire ability to use Wine because Wine, there's like a giant list of patch sets to get it working, and it's getting there, but we still don't have native Wayland Wine, so there's that problem as well. I don't know. It's a tough question to really answer what would have happened, because you don't have that crystal ball. But I don't know. It is what it is. We're here now, so can't go back.
I think it's better this way. We've had a excruciatingly slow adoption for Wayland, and I think having it any slower would have stopped the development basically completely. So yeah.
So I guess I do want to jump back to one other thing with regarding theming. Whilst CSS isn't a formal theming API, like it's not, okay, here is like the set of things you can change. It's you can change anything. It's not really theming. It's just, it's basically breaking the application to make it look a certain way. I think the issue that we see, and the reason why a lot of people are sort of, I guess, so opposed to the changes that were made, is we have treated it like theming for so long. Like it's the same thing with like KDE global themes, for example, is another good example where they've just sort of been, we just sort of accepted that you install this thing and it just does everything. No one has really properly, like, the developers obviously knew, like, it, from the start, what GTK had was not theming, but to the users, it looked like theming, and it acted enough like theming, where, I guess, now that there's this, like, shift away from that, and obviously GTK 4 by itself still has that there, but GNOME itself, they're moving away from that, and I guess have moved away from that. There is, I guess, it just doesn't make any sense to someone who, again, doesn't have that, like, internal knowledge of what's going on in the project. Even though the developers were clear, like, they thought they were clear amongst themselves, it's just that message never properly got out to, like, the rest of the user base, I guess.
I think that to a certain extent, it's just difficult to explain a problem to someone that doesn't have it.
Right.
Like if I'm telling you, just like as a completely random example, I like something that many people don't understand. For example, like socially, oh, I have trouble, I don't know, relating with people, speaking with people, right? People that might have some kind of social anxiety or something like that. That's difficult to relate with. That's difficult to understand because most people don't have that. And it's as like inappropriate as an example that might be. I think that it speaks to the point. Like you don't have this issue, you don't understand it. It's reasonable, like to assume that, right? And let me just make you an example here. So I make my application and I design a particular piece of this application to look like a boombox, okay, with CSS. I write my own classes, or I even like combine widgets that are not meant to do what I'm letting them do to make it look like a boombox, okay? Random guy comes around, makes a theme, and doesn't even know of the existence of my application. All of a sudden, the boombox looking thing doesn't work anymore. Or like, I don't know how themes even work with something like shortwave that has like a mini player looking thing that's really cool, but like very much not I don't know what, like the developer here like did something pretty cool, but very custom. How do you theme around that? Do you make exceptions? Like you make special rules for every application out there? It just becomes like you cannot, as a themer, deal with it. Like, and as a user, you cannot expect the theme developer or to deal with that. And just as well, you cannot expect the application developer to like expect random themes to do whatever with their application. And I think that there is a middle ground there somewhere that you can reach, and that's like a theming API.
Right.
There is something sort of kind of looking like a theming API in GTK4 and Libadwaita. And you might have seen it with something like the new GNOME text editor, or some, I think the black box terminal is a good example, where you basically change the syntax highlighting color, and it basically changes the entire user interface colors to like along with it. I think that looks amazing. That can lead to some usability issues, but that's not really too big of an issue. And as far as I know, there has been work. There is probably still work going on to like finish up this API and like offer it publicly as a recoloring API that like users can access, right? I think that that's like a reasonable middle ground. And like depending on what you actually want to do with your theme, it might or might not be enough. And if it's not enough, then I'd say if you really want to see these like contribute to the discussion, again, work with upstream, try to make the recoloring or the theming API a thing, to the extent that it makes sense, and to the extent that application developers can rely on the toolkit to not break their applications randomly with random stuff, right?
I do think recoloring is probably a better way to take it, because the issue we see with the CSS stuff especially is coloring's one thing. It's when you start messing with like spacing, like padding, margins, that's when applications really start to break. And the problem with the CSS is there isn't a guard there to stop you doing that. Like, you can make a theme where it is just messing with the colors, and it's mostly fine. I don't want to say perfectly fine. It's mostly fine, because there obviously are issues you run into with, like, contrast, for example, where it might... this colored elements being colored in a certain way might fit on the applications you test, but as you mentioned, there are applications that might be using those components in weird and maybe unintended ways, but when they're using Adwaita, it doesn't matter because they look the way Adwaita looks, and it's a hack and it shouldn't do that, but it looks like the developer intends. But the second you start messing with colors, it just all falls apart.
Yeah. And like, you don't even have, like, I made a completely outrageous example, but like, you don't even have to look at like imaginary stuff to find good examples. Like, I'm thinking about complex applications, right? Something like Kdenlive, Ardor, or Z-Rhythm, right? Z-Rhythm in particular being written with GTK. Also, Darktable is a good example. Both Darktable and Z-Rhythm, for example, are written in GTK, and they effectively have their own theme, and they will not work without their own theme. So what is the angry themer gonna do about that? I don't know. The application just needs that CSS that overrides the entirety of even the GTK and the Libadwaita style sheet with something custom to function properly. For whatever reason, it's the developer's choice. And like, for, again, particularly for these kind of complex applications, I think they really make sense, because you're trying to cram so many things onto like a screen that might be as small as 7 inches, if not even smaller. If you like think about mobile, at some point you just need to like put in some ground rules, like put in some like pillars that are your truth, and that they are movable and that you can rely on.
No, I think that I think that's definitely fair. Like, Darktale, I think, is a really good example here. I didn't realize that was a GTK application, because
It is.
Like, well, Kdenlive, Kdenlive is also another really good example. Like, you can, as soon as you swap away from any of the theme, like any of like the basic themes, like breeze light, breeze dark, things just like it just doesn't work. And GIMP, obviously, they ship their own themes, and they have, like, when they move to GTK 3, they are building their own like theming system specifically for GIMP. I think something we can look to that's already done a recolor API, maybe it's more than GNOME would want, but Cosmic. Cosmic, they are gonna have theming, but it's not going to be full CSS. It's more, you can change specific accent colors, and you can't even change every color. It's going to infer certain colors based on what you choose, specifically with the goal of, I don't know the maths, but like there's some algorithm nonsense you can do to specify that the color that is generated has a certain level of contrast. I'm sure somebody knows how that all works, but
that's exactly the same in the partially implemented, already practically used GTK Libadwaita recoloring API, where you define like I don't know, the primary background color, and like the darker one is going to be calculated from that. It's just like a rule that says, okay, you take this color and you darken it, following a certain algorithm, right? Or you make it lighter to do something else, right? So that's exactly, I think, what GTK is also trying to do. And I think that that's a sensible choice, because you're giving customization options, and you're also like offering developers a good API to rely on. And plus, let's remember that these customization options don't only apply to end users or distributions that necessarily want their own branding on stuff, but it also applies to what the developers can actually do. Many GTK for debug applications can take advantage of these recoloring stuff already, and I think that they look pretty. They definitely look the part.
Oh, I thought there was something more you were going to say to that.
Sorry, come again?
I thought there was something more you were going to say after that. I didn't know you were just going to stop there. No, I do think that Libadwaita apps, it's weird, right? I think Libadwaita apps, they look good. It's not the style I particularly would go for on my system, but on like I guess it's hard to say objectively good looking theme, but like it's clearly a well-crafted theme. And if you look at, I think this is a good way to put it. If you look at a Libadwaita application, you can very clearly tell where it's from, right? Like, there is no guessing, oh, is this maybe from this desktop or that desktop? It's very clearly, this was designed with Libadwaita. This was designed specifically with the GNOME desktop in mind. And I guess that's a similar appeal that like macOS has, for example, where, you know, I know some people don't like the comparison between GNOME and macOS, but I think in this sense it does work, where macOS has sort of very clear design principles they go for. Obviously, certain things like games fall completely out of that, but when you see an application that is designed with macOS's principles in mind, you can very clearly tell where it's from, and I guess maybe it acts as like a form of, I don't know, it feels cohesive, right? Like you look at,
and that's the big lie.
Okay.
The cohesiveness of the desktop. Desktops don't have to be necessarily cohesive. I mean, yeah, it might be satisfying to have like 10 apps open and they all look the same, but then you start to think about it, they all look the same. Do you know how hard it is when you have applications that are all functionally, like the shape is all identical, to tell them apart? Like when you have many apps open and you have like the window overview, point,
actually, yeah.
They're difficult to tell apart. And I think that like having more and more heterogeneous desktop experience does have a value, like it or not. It makes sense. And besides, again, it's really I don't think it's really to necessarily be user's choice. I mean, the user can do, again, whatever they want with the system to the extent that that particular application supports it, or like even if it has hacks that you can apply on top of it to make it do the thing that you want it to do, right? You can still, as the user, you can still do it. You're on your own for sure, but like the application developer has put thought into it, and like there's no good way to have the users or whoever else wants to redistribute your thing completely like have a totally uniform looking desktop. That's just not gonna happen. Again, Steam is a good example. I don't think, like, even in Mac OS, in Windows, you like, I use a MacBook for work. Horrible experience, wouldn't recommend it. I do use a virtual machine inside of it, but I do need to use Mac OS from time to time, and that's just when I start swearing and my life gets more miserable. Anyway, Mac OS is not a great experience, and applications are not consistent. Sure, if you use Finder, if you want to put yourself through that, yeah, it's consistent with, I don't know, Preview. What else? What other Apple application do you might want to use on a daily basis? Safari? Do people use Safari? Yeah, you have 3 apps that look consistent.
Third biggest web browser. Now, to be fair, Chrome is the biggest by. No, I think it's second.
There are 3 web browsers.
I want to say it's bigger than Firefox. Someone's going to correct me on the numbers, but I think it might be bigger than Firefox. Maybe. But, Chrome is so much further above that it doesn't actually matter if Firefox or Safari is bigger.
I don't think it makes a difference to be the third biggest when your competition, like the number, or the second biggest, if the competition is 3, right? Sure, you're there somewhere. It's like BSD users, God bless their soul, but they are there. Sure, there are not a big number of operating systems out there, so they show up maybe in graphs. Anyway,
Expect angry
in
emails from
macOS,
BSD users.
yeah. Okay, direct your angry BSD powered emails at Brody Robertson. Anyway,
Yes.
macOS, Windows, they're not consistent experiences.
Sure,
They are all over the place. Particularly if you like, you use something like a corporate thing, right? A corporate issued laptop. You have the VPN app that looks like it was designed by blind monkeys. I don't know. No, blind monkeys probably have a better aesthetical taste. You have Teams. You have Zoom. You have whatever else. Like you have like VS Code. Do we want to talk about VS Code? All of these things, they are not consistent with anything. Like the best thing you can do is like probably in VS Code you can have like a color scheme that kind of looks like something Apple would design, but that like goes only like a certain way, right?
Sure.
It's just the reality of things. Developers do their thing, and like if you like the application, you're gonna use it. Like I don't think that anyone complains, like, or well, people do complain, but like if you don't like the way Steam looks, I don't particularly enjoy the Steam UI. I don't really care too much for it because at the end of the day, it's a good service. I enjoy using it. I would make some changes maybe, but it's, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It makes me play my games. I'm happy with it. That's all I need to care for.
I guess you're sort of what you're getting at is that this idea of having, even if we do have, let's just assume that Libadwaita never existed and GNOME was still built pure GTK4. Even then, this idea of having a perfectly consistently themed desktop, you would argue, is just, it's possible in a very minimal sense, but as soon as you start adding in weird applications that are built in Electron or their Steam or your browser and things like this, things start to, I guess, completely lose any possibility of being consistently themed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure anyone listening has probably experienced it. Like, I remember at some point, was it 10 years ago or something? There were like these. I don't know what we were doing, but there were like some people trying to have purely GTK based desktop or a purely Qt based desktop, and like they were going out of their way to only use these are the toolkit apps, and I think it was before Electron. Yeah, that was an interesting time. It's an exercise in style at that point. I agree that it might be interesting to like as a challenge. Oh, can I use insert like a YouTuber face with the mouth open? Can I leave 10 days with only using GTK apps, something like that, right? Yeah, it's an interesting conversation starter, but I don't think that it's more than that. It doesn't bring in any value.
No, I think that's a fair point. I don't know, right? Like I've never really been. Whilst I care about people having that ability there if they care about it, like my system has always been like a very minimal hacked together theme. Like my theme is dark with a blue accent. So if I can do that, I don't really care about like the specific color of dark gray. Like as long as I can get dark with a blue accent or a red accent, depending on how I feel that day, that's as far as it goes for me. And that's pretty easy to like match even between toolkits with completely different theming systems. Like if your goal is something that's minimal, like you want a dark theme, like that's pretty mostly easy enough to achieve. Most applications will suit that today. There are still some exceptions that you can't do that, but you know, that'll be the exceptions. But especially you'll see places like Unix porn, for example, where there'll be people that are like, they're like the Pywall users, where they have the colors of all of their applications based off of like their wallpaper, and they've probably spent 30 hours just getting all of these different applications. Maybe they built their own custom Steam theme as well to fit that as well. Maybe they even forked Libadwaita to, I don't know, modify
It's an
colors
interesting
in it.
exercise in style,
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
teaches you some stuff in the process. But it's like playing, like racing itself. I It's fun. I understand it's fun. I have done it for a while, not like rising window managers. I never really got into that, but that's because just I'm me, right? But it's something fun we can do with computers. Like, what Windows or Mac OS user can say that, right? And I think that that's precious in a way. I don't want that to necessarily. I'm not saying that I want to see that going away. That's a fun thing. That's like, because like computers for most people are just like the scary gray box that you have to open from time to time because you have to edit a Word document, right? And we Linux users, I think we know better than that. We know that computers can be fun, can be interesting, can be like a tool that you actually enjoy using, right? And I think that part of that definitely is also like rising it as like ugly as you want your rice to be. I still think that that's cool. And I think that also like many developers start from stuff like that, or rising your desktop. That's fine. But then again, like if you're thinking about practical stuff, if you're going out of your way to argue with developers and like harass people just because like you can't change the color of your thing, I think it's like a little bit too much.
Yeah. No, I think if you're going to the point where it's one thing to have a discussion with the developers, but if you're like name calling, if you're like if you're going into the repo rehashing the same topics over and over again after you've already gotten an answer, like at that point, like I guess, yeah, what are you doing? Like, I guess you can do it, but maybe do something more productive with your time. And I don't know, maybe they should probably just ban you from the repo if you become enough of a problem. But
maybe instead of complaining, like collect a number of people and start contributing to a theming API for the particular thing that you care about. Even if it's like a patch set on top of the thing that's never going to be upstreamed, it's still like something for one you can tell you've made it. Like if you're building a CV, that's kind of impressive thing. Or like I don't know, might be even a source of revenue. Who knows? Maybe you can get donations for it. People care enough about this stuff that I think that they will pay for it. But like again, complaining, like empty complaints, I don't think that they necessarily go anywhere. For some things, like of course there's the limit, right? Where like a limit where the thing you're asking is reasonable, or like even if it's unreasonable, if you ask it like a normal person, it's fine. Like no one's gonna go at anyone for like asking a question or bringing an issue that will not get fixed. But like it's this behavior, like rehashing and keeping on rehashing old stuff, that I think it's detrimental to the entire experience.
Well, on the topic of rehashing old stuff, let's talk about client-side and server-side decorations.
All right, I'm on it. For me, it's really like I think that like from my end, it's really simple, like a simple idea. My applications have client-side rendering. Client-side decoration. I think it's prettier than server-side. That's my idea. I think that desktops or like compositors should implement a server-side protocol, because there are some applications that don't have to implement a decoration, like games, for example. Like you were talking about Factorio a while ago.
Yes. I've got the dev coming on later this week as well.
All right, nice. I'll be looking forward to that episode.
It'll be out like a month and a half from now because I've got a giant backlog.
All right. Anyways, yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense for games to implement decoration. That's like the easiest example you can make. You can easily extend that example however far you want. If an application doesn't want to draw a border, they're in the rights to not draw a border. If your desktop wants a border around it, then it just like draws it server side. It's as easy as that. Again, personally, I think client side looks better, but this is hardly about like opinions. This is about functionality that applications are expecting to have.
Okay, I thought there'd be more of like a difference of opinion here. No, I think I pretty much agree with exactly what you said there. I think, like, when done well, Spotify is one example where it is not done well. When done well, client-side decorations do look better. The issue with Spotify is their client-side decorations are kind of broken, where if client-side is the only option, they will render correctly. But if you're on a desktop with server-side, it doesn't move. Like, they've re-implemented.
They draw both.
Yeah. So they aren't using Electron's server-side client-side decoration system. They've got their own custom system. So if you're on a desktop that like KDE, which is going to do server-side decorations, it will just not draw the client-side decorations. So you lose out on all of the functionality in the client-side decorations. But if client-side is the only option there, then they get rendered correctly. So on GNOME, I believe, they will draw it properly and the application functions like it should. Now, that's a problem specifically with Spotify designing their app in a stupid way, and there's no reason to do it like that. Maybe there is. I don't know with their internals.
No, I don't think there is. I think that just the developer didn't know any better and just like needed to close the ticket, basically.
But yeah, I think when, like, I know you brought up macOS before, but I think when you look at apps like Slack on macOS, they do client-side decorations, and I think it works there, right? Like, and I think
Slack doesn't do client-side decoration on Linux, as far as I know.
That sounds right. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's correct. And like Steam is another example where Steam does client-side decorations. It works, right? Like, it works really well. But yeah, you are right. There are these cases where either devs don't want to add server-side decorations, or, you know, there's just, like, most games are going to be run in full screen, right? Like, obviously, you need to be able to support windowed, because maybe the game will run in a window, I don't know. But I don't like that we're in this state where, and I know GNOME can choose to do what they want to do, but I really don't like that we're in this state where everybody else is in agreement that server-side decorations as a fallback is just a good thing to have. And no matter how much time passes, and no matter how long we've had the XDG decoration protocol, it's still just not of interest for GNOME to implement. Even, like, no matter how many application developers come to them, and I think they've had open patch sets to implement it as well, it's just not of interest to get that problem resolved.
That's just GNOME for you. I can make a bunch more examples about that. In fact, I currently am not using GNOME. I'm using Plasma, and to my yeah, I mean, I don't like Plasma. I've never liked Plasma. It's not for me. I understand the idea behind it. I respect the different choices for the desktop. It's just that I prefer GNOME. I cannot use GNOME right now for a variety of reasons. Like, most importantly, the biggest reason being that GNOME mainland still doesn't support DRM leasing. If you go to the infamous DRM leasing issue, you will see my name as the author of the issue. And it's been open for how many years now? 5 years, something like that. And yeah, I at some point for the longest time I've played VR on Linux on X GNOME on Xorg, just because this was what I was using. Then Plasma 6 came out with a bunch of new cool stuff, and I just said, yeah, I know I'm not gonna like it. I know it's gonna be a bad experience for me personally, because that's just not my preference. But I think that I will have a better experience, because also VR on X as a lot of issues that it doesn't have on Wayland. So I just like jumped ship, and I'm here now. I don't know what, like, honestly, cannot, like, I'm not able to tell you what's going on inside the GNOME for these issues being in the state that they are. For what I can guess is that, first of all, it's a very old code base. It had a number of big changes over the years. Matter in particular is still very, very like reliant on old code, and that's kind of problematic. To some extent, that can explain it, right? But to another extent, we have patch sets that enable GNOME Wayland to support DRM leasing. I don't know if they're complete, but if not, like, they're 90% there. But that's not the issue. The issue is that people are still like debating. I'm not sure about like what the current state is now. At some point, I think like a developer like came in and said, we never said that DRM leasing is not an unacceptable solution. Like, if we want to stay on that for the meantime, like before we find a better solution, we can do that. And like possibly the conversation like toned down a little bit from there. But there are still conversations going on. If, oh, we want to do a portal, we don't want to do a portal doesn't make sense, we want to make it part of login D. There's like a
there is a recent where do I have the link somewhere? Give me a sec. Listen. There is a recent merge request that has been opened. I think I put it here. Did I put it here? I forgot to write the link down. Why did I do that? Now I'm never going to be able to find it. Oh, no, wait. Yes, okay. So, there is this recent merge request. So, how do we... How do we explain the state of DRM leasing? So, it started as GNOME acted, and we're like, hey, we're good with this. Then they wanted to do the portal, and then I think Sebastian Wick wanted to go and do a dbus service, and he went and worked on that. Jonas worked on the DRM leasing implementation from like 3 or so years ago, and this new merge request is based on the work from both Jonas and Sebastian. And it seems like so far it needs work, right? Like, it's patch sets always need work when they're doing, like, when they first started, but so far it seems like there's no one trying to block it. Like, the developer is going to go and make some changes based on what's been said and come back and go from there. But at least right now, it seems like we might actually get DRM leasing resolved. Whether that's
as long as you don't clip this and put it on the on the channel as a clip, people are not gonna see this because we're very far into the show and no one's gonna care about it. It's gonna get merged, so just be stealthy about it.
I hope it gets merged, right? Because, like, I've seen this discussion go on for so long. I've seen game developers get just, like, and people from Valve who are, like, if Valve's documentation for VR specifically says, as a fix for, like, one of the fixes for GNOME is just install KDE, like, that shouldn't be the requirement for what's supposed to be, like, the pinnacle desktop of Linux. The default desktop in many ways. Like, when people come to Linux, they see Ubuntu, they see Fedora. GNOME is basically the default, for better or worse. And that default, you just can't do VR. And applications sometimes just don't have window borders because you can't do it on GNOME. And it's annoying, it's sad, and I'm glad that they've moved past the idea of blocking this entirely and are at least willing to accept patches now. Because it's one thing if they don't want to do it, right? Like, that's fine, but when it was blocking patches and they just didn't want to accept that work, like that's also it's also reasonable, right? Like someone needs to maintain those patches in the future, but it is kind of annoying.
Well, honestly, like just looking at it, it doesn't look like a big patch set.
Yeah,
there's worse code in Matter, I think. This.
Surely. Surely. But hey, hopefully at some point we can stop saying that GNOME just doesn't support VR. That would be nice.
Hopefully.
GNOME 47,
we have a great application written in GTK4 and Libadwaita with the latest like pizzazz ready for it. So when they're ready, I'm ready. But like a little thing that I wanted to mention, like we give so much crap to GNOME for not having this and not having that. The moment I switched to Plasma, I realized that the grass does always look greener on the other side, right? But it's not actually greener. There are things that are broken in Plasma, and I don't see anyone talking about it. And if like I don't want to hate on the Plasma developers, they're doing a great job. So don't take this the wrong way, but I think that the problem is that, like, as you said, GNOME is effectively the default. There's so many people using GNOME that they are all complaining about the issues that it has. Apparently, I don't want to say that no one is using Plasma, but so very few people are using Plasma that basically its issues are very much less relevant in the discussion, right?
When I did my early Plasma videos, people got confused by some of the problems I brought up, like the on edit mode, if you right click on the panel, go enter edit mode. So right click on the desktop, click enter edit mode. You don't have like the settings for like the panel, right? But if you right click on the panel and then click exit edit mode, it brings up the settings for the panel.
Oh, no. Someone used a not state somewhere.
Now, but I also brought up just the fact that the whole edit mode, the way it works, is kind of confusing. People are like, it works fine. Like because I was confused about how to open up the settings for the panel anyway. Apparently, there's like a little button in the corner. I didn't realize the button was there. And in 6.1, like the KDE devs agree with me. Like they're completely redesigning the way edit mode works, and it's way better now. It's still like, you know, early days. There's still a lot of work that could be done to make it a lot better. But like, I feel like where they're at now is just, it's much, much cleaner. And it looks like, it looks like they've clearly, I guess, taken some of this.
They listen to feedback.
Yeah, listen to feedback here. Yeah, for sure.
I think that's something we really need to give the KDE devs good credit for, because they they are very, very responsive to feedback, and they go out of their way to make their desktop as the best it can be.
And like this isn't the first time they've redesigned edit mode. Like this is like their second or third iteration. But I think where they're at with 6.1 actually, right? Like a problem that, and this is just a natural problem that you're going to have with open source, right? There is a lot of developers and there is not a lot of designers. So what you often see is design being done by developers, and there are some developers who have an eye for design. There's also most developers though, and most developers, they can design something that works, but it has that like developer touch to it, right? Like, you know that the person designing this doesn't have like a design background, and it's kind of just like it's estimating good design, but it's not getting very close.
To be fair, designers don't always hit the spot necessarily.
Sure. I think it's always good to have
at least
like, different, even with design work, right? Like, it's good to have that back and forth discussion. It's good to have like different drafts of that work, and have people from like who have like a developer background come in and give their feedback on it. And you know, the first draft's always gonna be bad.
There are designers that are actually willing to listen to the developers.
Hopefully.
That's new. But that's new to me. No, I'm just kidding. It just I know some very, very nice and very collaborative designers.
Yeah. So is the main reason why you're on KDE at this point because of the whole de-releasing stuff?
Yeah, that, and like not like I don't want to deal with some issues that the GNOME has. Like I have an entire application that I made that's Hydra paper for setting a different wallpaper to each writer. I don't want to maintain that anymore for a variety of reasons. Many of my projects right now are kind of on a hiatus. And that's, for one, that's because I'm not using them. And for the other reason is that most of my development, like open source development career, if you want to say that, has been on Python. And I recently, as of some years at this point, fell out of love with Python for a variety of reasons. And I don't want to touch those code bases anymore. So at some point, some of these applications I will bring back, but I will bring them back powered by crabs instead of snakes next time. So as soon as I have the time and energy to do that, I think this is very much something that I want to do. It's just, when you have so many other things going on in your life, it's sometimes it's like I would like to have 48-hour days just to be able to do this kind of stuff, right? But that's just the reality we live in.
Yeah.
Anyway, there are some things with GNOME that I just cannot stand, right? The like wallpaper thing is one thing. Missing functionality is another thing. Like having the server side decoration thing is one good example. Another example is, I don't know how GNOME supports HDR right now. Does it support it?
I know KDE's got theirs. GNOME
Plasma does support it because I use it.
Yeah. Merge request.
Anyway,
I don't know.
The last time I checked, it doesn't.
I don't think it does yet. There is an open merge request from 2 years ago. Is this stalled? There's conversations as of about 3 months ago. So
the usual.
Yeah.
It's going the way we're expecting it to go. Also, another big thing is adaptive sync. Sorry, is it adaptive sync? It's like a pre-sync, basically. Okay.
Variable refresh rate. Yeah.
Yeah. VRR. All right, that's right. VRR is definitely something that I want, and at least like GNOME supports it now. I think to some extent. I have heard that it's kind of buggy sometimes. I've not tested it because I moved to Plasma before I could actually test it. I mean, it's great to see that like some of the features that I want are being implemented, but like at some point you just like I just gave up. I just said I want a functional desktop. Like I am willing to sacrifice some usability for having like these features here.
It looks like as of like a few months ago it got merged. So yeah, I don't know if it's buggy or
HDR
not.
thing?
No, not HDR. No, definitely not HDR.
The VRR.
VRR, yes.
Yeah. I know VRR is actually, you can enable it as I think it's an experimental setting somewhere you can enable.
Yeah, but looks of it here, you need to like, you need to run a big G settings thing to enable it. Yeah, it's experimental feature. Yeah. But I don't know. Like at the end of the day,
it's a shame.
Yeah, like it is a shame, right? But I think I do think GNOME from a again, I don't like the look of Libadwaita, but I think what GNOME has going on, assuming it had the features that were missing, I think it would be a better experience for a new user. Because KDE is great, but KDE does suffer from the fact that it just assumes that you are an advanced user. And there is a lot of as we said before, there's the 6 different settings for window focus, right? Like, I don't know what they mean. I just select the one that I know it does the thing that it works the way I want it to. And I think GNOME is just it's an easier onboarding process, but it's just, there are these issues where it's just hard to, if you care about gaming, for example, it's hard to recommend it right now in its current state. And there's a couple other use cases, like accessibility is another big one, where I believe Orca currently doesn't work on the Wayland version of GNOME,
Oh,
which is kind of big. And
yeah,
even
that
they
sounds
admit
right.
like this is a big problem. There's a reason why they don't want to disable X11 just yet. Yeah, that's a very major issue.
That's the Orca. Yeah, I remember hearing about the Orca thing. That's also tricky to implement, considering like the security boundaries that you have on
Yeah,
Wayland.
yeah,
Yeah, but
but
we're gonna work on it. Hopefully.
it's a tricky one, but it's one of those things where if you want an accessible desktop, like, you don't really have a choice about it. You need to come up with something. It's okay if you don't want your desktop to be accessible, right? But like, if your goal is to make it so, some sort of solution needs to go in place.
Definitely, definitely. I think that like probably the best bet is something like the accessibility APIs in the various proprietary, semi-proprietary operating systems like Mac OS or even Android, right? They have accessibility APIs that you as a user have to specifically enable. Um, that could be a way. Let's see where that goes.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is a tricky topic because it's important, but I guess it's something that will keep X around for a while still.
Yeah. It's, I thought there'd be a lot more disagreements in this episode, right? Like, I didn't think we'd end up agreeing on as much as we did, but I do think there was definitely a lot said here, especially in the first, like, hour when you just wouldn't stop talking and I couldn't get a word in. No, it's good. I like it when I don't have to talk as much. It means that the guest is actually, easy to communicate with, right? Like, I've had some people where I will ask a question and I get like a sentence or two. Those are rough episodes. But when I can just prompt you and you go for like 20 minutes on something like that, it's nice. And I think you laid out a lot of the reasons why, like, GTK is doing what it's doing, why Libadwaita is a good idea from that perspective. And hopefully, even if people disagree with what your perspective is, they at least have a more, I guess, nuanced opinion on the way this all goes down.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like I hold the absolute truth or anything,
Sure.
but like I have a certain point of view
Your
and one
experience
that I
using
have
it.
seen. Yeah, and like I don't have I haven't seen like this particular point of view expressed as much as I would have liked in like media coverage in general. So I just think like like putting my 2 cents out there would have made sense, right?
Sweet. Well, we're just past the 2-hour mark now, so I guess direct people wherever you want to direct them to. Do you want, like,
Okay.
check out a website or whatever?
So you can find me on the interwebs at gabmus.org. That's my website where you will always find my latest links and shenanigans, whatever I'm up to. I don't post there often. You will also find me on Mastodon or the Fediverse, as you prefer to call it. Right now, I am at Gabmus at fastodon.org. But in case that changes, you will find the updated link in my website. So that's always going to be up.
Awesome. Yeah.
All right.
Nothing else you wanted to mention?
You can find my stuff on GitLab, gitlab.com/Gabmus, I guess. Again, you can find all of that
All
in my
links
website.
on your website?
That's
Okay.
yeah, all the links are like little icons right at the top of the website. So that's kind of handy. I don't have to remember mentioning this or that thing.
Well, okay, as for me, the main channel is Brody Robertson. I do Linux videos there 6-ish days a week. I don't know what'll be out, but check it out. There'll be Probably something Wayland Protocols related, maybe. I don't know. This will be out in like a month, so check it out then. The gaming channel is Brody on Games. I stream there twice a week, probably still playing Sekiro. I might be doing a co-op stream with Ren, so check it out. I don't know what we'll be playing. Maybe It Takes Two. Just check it out. We still need to start on the game. And if you're listening to the audio version of this, you can find the video version on YouTube at Tech Over Tea. If you want to find the audio version, there is a RSS feed. Search Tech Over Tea on your favorite podcast platform, and you will find the episodes. So, give me the final word. How do you want to end this?
Thanks again for having me, and go ahead and like harass developers for not having theme support, I guess, or not.
Is that how you want to end it?
They're gonna do it anyways, so I might just as well tell them.
Yeah, please don't. Actually, that was a joke.
Yeah,
that was I know humor is hard for some people. Work. That was a joke. Don't do that. Yeah.
Also, again, angry comments, angry BSD users. You know Brody's email. You can find it.
Yeah. I'll probably.
Oh, leave it in the comments. Drives engagement.
Definitely. See you guys later.